Good morning. Welcome to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. My name is Susie Snyder, and I'm host of today's program, First Person. Thank you for joining us. We're in our 16th year of the First Person program, and today our first person is Helena Peabody, whom we shall meet shortly. This 2016 season of First Person is made possible through the generosity of the Lewis Franklin Smith Foundation with additional funding from the Arlene and Daniel Fisher Foundation and Helena Rubinstein Foundation. We're grateful for their sponsorship. First Person is a series of weekly conversations with survivors of the Holocaust who share with us their firsthand account of their experience during the Holocaust. Our program will continue through mid-August, and the museum's website, www.ushmm.org, provides information about each of our upcoming first-person guests. Anyone interested in keeping in touch with the museum and its programs can complete the Stay Connected card in their program, which is, I actually don't have it, but can somebody hold it up? Thank you. In doing so, you'll receive an electronic copy of Helena's biography so that you can remember and share her testimony after you leave here today. Helena will share with us her first-person account of her experiences as a survivor for about 45 minutes. If we have time at the end of the program, we'll take some questions and answers. We'll take some questions for Helena to answer, and we've prepared a brief slideshow of her biography for you. Secondly, our photographer, Joel, will come up on stage after she finishes the last word, and Joel will take a picture of Helena with you, the audience, in the background. And so it makes for a nice photo, and we just ask you if you would just help us do that. And with that, let me go ahead and introduce Helena's history. This is a map of Europe and a detailed map of Poland. Helena was born in Krakow on December 12, 1932. She was the daughter of Ignacy and Olga Littman. This photograph features Helena with her mother and her aunt Irka in 1938. Helena, her mother, and her younger sister survived the war in Yaroslav under false papers identifying them as Catholics. On the way to Yaroslav, the family ran into a Polish man who threatened to denounce them and reveal their identity. Helena's mother struck a bargain with the man using their tickets for the luggage, all the money she had, and the coats they were wearing in this picture. This is the house where Helena and her family stayed in Yaroslav. In this photograph, Helena and her sister Eva are celebrating Christmas in hiding. Helena's mother decided the safest place for the family to hide was in plain sight. Helena's mom found a job at a German headquarters peeling potatoes for the German troops. This is a photograph of the German headquarters where Olga Littman worked. After the war, Helena and her family emigrated to England. Please welcome Helena. Do you want me to sit on this side?
I don't. Doesn't matter.
Okay. I didn't know if you have a preference.
Not really. Yes.
So thank you very much, Helena, for joining us today. So you were born in Krakow, but how long did your family live there after you were born?
None. My parents both come from Krakow. The families are from Krakow, but my parents, when they got married, they went to a place called Zaleszczyki. I think, did you mention that?
I didn't mention
No.
Zaleszczyki.
Yeah.
I try not to say it because I mispronounce it.
Well, it was all the way down on the frontier of Romania. Now it's all Ukraine, but then
right.
it was Romania, and we were living in a place called Zaleszczyki. My mother went to her mother to give birth to both my sister and to me. So that's why, even though we're all from Krakow, but we lived in Zaleszczyki. So in 1939, We were living in Zaleszczyki. My father was a dentist, and that's why he moved to a smaller town where he opened a surgery. And my mother was a homemaker, but she had been a champion swimmer of Poland, so she was happy because there was a river there. We used to go kayaking on the river, and the river was a natural frontier with Romania. So you could go halfway, and then there were boys there, so you couldn't go any further. We had beaches there. Weather was absolutely fantastic. We had 4 distinct seasons. Very, very cold winter, which meant that my mother could take and teach me skating before I was 5. And she also was teaching me to ski, and all together. And in the summer, of course, we were on the water and on the beach most of the time.
So let me back up a little. You were
Yes.
born in 1932.
Yeah.
Your parents, how did they meet?
Well, my father was a very good-looking young man, and my mother was very famous at the age of 18, having won the championship of Poland. So I guess that's what happened, and they met in Krakow.
So were they from a traditional Jewish family, or were they more secular?
My mother was with a completely non-religious family. I mean, they observed some holidays, but not much. My father came from a very religious family, but mostly people who had become professionals in Poland, especially in Krakow. They were not. They stopped being religious, and plus my mother didn't speak Yiddish and she didn't cook Jewish stuff, so we were not religious.
So she didn't speak Yiddish, but your father did.
My father had, but I never heard him.
Mm-hmm. So where did he go to dental school?
In Krakow.
In Krakow.
Yeah.
So you describe this very idyllic life, and I've seen pictures of your pre-war life. It's beautiful.
Yes, it was beautiful.
You're how much older than than Eva, your sister?
She's younger. My sister is 6.5 years younger than me. She was born 2 months before the war, June the 30th.
So
1939.
the thing that really strikes me when I read your story and I look at the pictures is that your mother is suddenly alone because your father has to, basically he goes into Romania. Can you describe what happened to him?
Yes, well, in 1939, when we understood, even though I was not quite 7, I knew that the Russians were coming to occupy us, because Russians and the Germans split Poland in 1939. So my father, knowing that previous war, the World War First, they took the Russians, when they occupied, they took the men into the army and by force, and you couldn't get out for 20 years. So a lot of men, including my father, crossed over to Romania. Now, some people took families with them. Some didn't. My father didn't, because he was afraid for my sister. She was a baby, and she thought there would be not enough facilities for my sister, so we stayed behind. So then very shortly after the Russians walked in, my father had gone. However, after a little time elapsed and the Russians pilfered and imprisoned all the members there that were leaders in the town, and my father and some other people also thought about it twice and tried to come back quickly, kind of under the cover of a sheet of a frozen river, tried to cross back. And by then the Russians sealed the border, and they caught them all, put them in prison, and said they were spies, gave them trials, and my father got 20 years hard labor and was sent off to Siberia. And so that's when we were left alone. And not only that, because the Russian law apparently is such that if there is somebody who is a criminal, that's quote unquote my father, the dentist, then the family also gets to Russia to be on the Gulag somewhere. However, for some unknown reason to us, they didn't take us, but they did throw us out of our house, because this was bourgeois, we couldn't have a house. And we were told to go to a little town called Tłuste, just up the road, very close by. And that's where we spent the time that the Russian occupied Poland.
Between till 41.
Yeah.
So let me back up a little because I wanted to ask about your father.
Yes.
What I was going to reference was that there is this photograph that we saw of your mother, you, and a baby.
Yes.
And no father because he's
that
gone.
was already gone, yeah.
Right. And so your mother is now having to deal with
The two of
a
us.
7-year-old
and
and a
baby.
1-year-old, a baby.
Yes.
And how did she do it?
Well, by miracles.
Do you remember what it was like for her?
Look,
you couldn't know what it.
I went to school,
Right.
and she took care of us. My mother had a lot of friends, and they, I think, supported her.
So you think she had a nice network, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, because we were not rich, so we definitely had a network.
Was your mother? What kind of person was she?
She was beloved by everybody, and I'm not just saying that because she's my mother, but she really was, and so. That's probably why. I met people, I still meet people who have known her and that tell me the same thing.
So when your father leaves, when he's taken, actually,
yeah.
after he leaves,
Yes.
was your mother informed that he was arrested, that he was sentenced to 20 years hard labor?
She went to Lvov, where he was held in that terrible prison there.
In Lvov,
to say
in
goodbye. Yes,
Eastern Poland, but later it would
and we
become
didn't hear,
Ukraine.
1 whole year we didn't hear anything. And my father would never talk about it and what they did there. But after a year, we corresponded a little bit just before the Germans decided to come back, the rest of it.
In 1941.
Yes, so at that time we corresponded, had a couple of letters back and forth. So we knew he was in Arkhangelsk, and we knew that he was a medical officer there because there were no doctors there, so they made a medical officer in the camp. But that's where he was. And then the moment that we heard that the Germans were coming, the Russians disappeared.
Right.
And we went back to our house, but of course we lost contact with father altogether.
So you're in Tvust, and your mother
Tvusta.
decides, Tvusta, and
Tvusta.
what is going on that makes your mother suddenly, she becomes fearful and you run?
Oh no, that's a long time after that. No, you jumped a little bit. No, we come back to Zaleszczyki and await the Germans. The Germans eventually, they come and occupy the rest of Poland.
In 1941.
Yes, including, of course, Zaleszczyki, where we are now back at home. And they put some very strict laws, particularly for the Jews. No schools for Jewish children altogether. Curfew, yellow stars on the houses, yellow stars on the armbands. Now, I was lucky that my father taught me to read and write just before going to kindergarten. He thought I should know that because so that I would be the best in the kindergarten. I swear that was it, but I don't remember any of it. As far as I know, I've always known how to read Polish and write Polish.
So
yes.
now you're living under German occupation. You're
Yes,
seeing that things are starting to happen.
I actually am fully aware what's happening, and the Germans create a Jewish committee of the Jewish leaders, so that they have different demands. Of course, they have demanded the same as the Russians. Whatever is pictures, money, foreign money. No radios was a death penalty. We don't know what's going on in the rest of the world, and we just hope for the best. Very, very cooperative. We just try to do the best. We've been through one occupation, now the other one. Right. My mother just trying to take care of the children and somehow survive. The Germans, as I said, had this Jewish committee, and they had various demands. Now, every Jew had to be working for the Germans. So in my mother's case, they knew my mother also was a wonderful knitter. She used to knit everything in the house. Everything was knit, including beautiful, what is it called, lace. She did lace, she did petit pois, and sweaters, and everything I had on was always knitted by her. So they put her job was to knit for the mayor of the town, who was German, his children. He had lots of children. So that was her job. If there was no particular job for anybody, they were told to clean the sidewalks. And also they used to take groups of young people for various jobs outside of town. So they would go out in the morning and they would become brought back in the afternoon.
Let me just ask you quickly, are you talking, at this point, were you in a ghetto?
No.
So wasn't in a ghetto yet?
No, not
Okay.
in Zaleszczyki, no.
And so people were being taken out.
No, they were
to
just a group of people were taking various jobs, you know.
Do labor.
Yeah, labor, exactly.
And let's be clear, you weren't getting paid for the labor.
Well, of course not. Of course not, no.
Okay, I wanted to be
also
clear.
the
This
rations
is slave
were-
labor.
yeah,
Your
yeah.
mother is performing slave labor, the town
Yes,
inhabitants.
absolutely, yes. Yeah, well, you see, I wasn't very concerned with that because money didn't come into play with my life.
But essentially, what you're saying is you had to have a job to stay alive. To keep, you had to have a job
had to work for the Germans.
And if they found that you were an adult, for
They
example,
knew everybody. They told my mother she was going to be a knitter because they had a list of everybody.
so they assigned you jobs.
So they assigned all the jobs, yes. No, so there was no such thing as not knowing.
And what was? Do you remember at all what life was like during this time period?
It's very scary. We mostly were very scared and just tried to cooperate. Whatever they asked, people were willing to accommodate them. And then, not very long afterwards, they demanded a rather larger number of people, especially young people. They needed a group of them to bind trees for the winter, they said.
Bind trees for the winter.
Yeah, the trunks, because it was a very cold winter,
Right.
as I said. So nobody thought anything of it, and they said that they needed to get these young people to walk up the road. It was just a...
And who demanded these people?
Pardon?
Who demanded these people? The Germans?
The Germans demanded it through the Jewish committee.
I see.
Yeah. And then they walked them up the road, and they were supposed to do the binding of the trees. And we waited for them to come back, as usual, and they didn't come back. And we didn't know what was happening, got very anxious. Not, as young as I was, you can tell that we were scared.
Of course, you can feel the anxiety.
And in the end, towards the evening, one man came, and he had been shot in the arm, and he told the story what happened, and which was that when they got to the this place where they were supposed to do the trees, they found an open grave, and they were all shot. And in fact, they had planks over the grave so that they made people lay down and shoot them, and they dropped as they were shot. And this man was one of the last ones to be shot, so they was on top of the grave. And when the Germans left, they didn't cover them very much. They didn't care. He managed to get himself out and come back. And apparently they missed his heart, just his arm was shot. And then he told us the story. So then we realized that that was the plan. Because up to then we had no idea what they were trying to do and what they were going to do. So everybody started looking for hiding places. That was the first thing everybody did. And sure enough, shortly afterwards, they demanded this time a group of people to go to work in Germany. And nobody believed them by then, so everybody scattered around and hid. My mother took my sister and me to a lady who used to cook for us. And we stayed there the whole day, and they managed to find they always had the numbers, to have a certain number and in the square, and they loaded them on the train and took them away. Never heard from them again. And we knew that this was what we were going to be running. But the Germans were very clever. They didn't want to have the trouble to look for us because there were less of us. There was a small town, the community wasn't that big, so they just threw all the rest of the Jews out to this place called Tworster, which was the same place we were during the Russian occupation. But at that point, you see, that was later to be a ghetto, but at that point it was just an area. They told us to go there.
Go to a specific place.
Yeah, specific
within
place.
Tworster.
Yes, in Tworster. So we settled in Worcester and took whatever we could with us. And first thing everybody started looking was hiding places.
Right.
And my mother said to me that that's not going to do us much good because they're going to move us again. You know, this obviously became...
So she had foresight to see
that's
that
what
this was problematic.
she was guessing that that's what they were going to do. What we found out is that not only our community was there, but people from the little communities around that area. So they were all there. That's why
Right.
it became a ghetto afterwards, because we didn't know that at
So
the
they brought
time.
all the smaller towns into this town.
That's right. Whoever they didn't manage to kill, they brought them all together and gathered us there. And of course, my mother was, you know, so devastated. She had these 2 kids, and she didn't care about anything except the kids, as most mothers do. I'm sure, but I could feel her you know, her
Angst.
and she just didn't know what to do. She tried to send us over to Romania, some night trips where at night, you know, and over the river, but nothing worked. And before we had a chance to do anything, again came a demand for people to work in Germany, and everybody scattered. You know, everybody had found some places where they hid. In our case, my mother didn't want to go to the basement where they, you know, proposed us to go, because she had been there before, so she knew a couple of farmers there. And so she decided to split us up and put me with one farmer, and she went with another farmer with my sister. She paid her in advance, and this farmer was supposed to keep her during the day whilst they were looking for people. And I was with another farmer who put me up in the loft. And all day long, I was, you know, the woman was coming back and telling me, she saw this one in the square, that one in the square, and I knew everybody. Mm-hmm. So I was sure my mother was caught, but they didn't say so, but, you know, I was sitting there worrying all day long. And towards the end of the evening, they apparently had the right number, and they sent them away. And finally, my mother did come with my sister to pick me up. And when she picked me up, she said, you know, I was thinking all day long that you were caught. Oh. So it was the same thing. She said, from now on, we're not going to split up. Whatever happens, all 3 of us will go together. And she then told me what happened to her, which was that the woman got scared in the middle of the day and threw her out into a field. And she said it was an empty field with just one bush, and she crouched there with my sister for the rest of the day. She said she doesn't know how they didn't see her. There were aeroplanes flying around, they were looking for people, and somehow she managed not to be seen. And so that's why she said, you know, we're not going to do this again, because I was sure that you were caught. And she started again looking for other ways. There was really nothing to be done. So, but then, you know, she came to the one conclusion with her friends, how very helpful, as I said, that we were 3 females.
Can I,
Yes.
Again, just jump in and ask a question?
Yeah.
You mentioned her friends. Are her friends non-Jewish friends?
Not Jewish.
Okay.
Jewish friends. No, we didn't know many people.
So
there.
everybody is really scattering and looking.
Oh, absolutely, everybody is. Yes, yeah. And we know we're all in a knowing that this is what's going to happen. In fact, one of her best friends with the baby was also taken at that point. So yeah, and so, you know, she's still thinking, and with the help with the friends, and she's thinking that maybe because there were 3 females, they came to the conclusion that we had maybe a chance if we get false papers, false identities. So some people did manage to survive. So they bought papers from a priest in Worcester, and we had 2 suitcases of what we owned, and I know her friends collected some money for her. And
that was going to be my next question. How did she?
Yeah, they collected money for her, and they took took us to the train. They decided to go to this place called Jarosław. I have no idea why. It was sort of halfway to Krakow, but who knows?
So it was a completely different town, further away. Nobody,
No, there were no Jews there anymore.
and nobody would recognize you.
Absolutely. Well, we hope not.
Right.
That was the
That
thing.
was your goal, to
That
be
was the goal,
unrecognizable.
yeah. Now, my sister was too young, so we didn't say anything. But my mother sat me down, taught me my new name, my new grandparents, my birthplace. Everything was new. We had a couple of advantages. We didn't speak Yiddish. We didn't have a Yiddish accent, so we couldn't give ourselves away. We had to, every single piece of paper we had to throw away. Of course, nothing, And of course, my mother's Polish was very good, and so was mine because of that. But she went to Polish school, and in Poland that was very important because they could tell by the accent. So the three of us, we went on this train to Jarosław. Hopefully, as I said, I don't know why that town. We said goodbye to our friends, and we were going to be on the train for 4 days and 4 nights with changes. So my mother had me by the hand, carrying my sister and the 2 suitcases, and that's how we went on the train and said goodbye to them. And we started traveling, and as we started traveling, you know how it is in a train, people start talking to you. So a young man attached himself to us, started chatting with my mother. Slowly started asking her questions, but eventually my mother said to me, he pushed me so hard that I could not withstand it anymore because he wanted to know about connections. He kind
She
of
told this to you after the war?
No.
Oh,
She told me then. No, she always told me everything. I was a
So
part of. I had to know in
Right.
order to be able to, to be a support to her. So she said, I could not take the pressure anymore because he thought maybe my grandfather, he was suspecting. And as far as Hitler was concerned, if your great-great-grandfather was Jewish, that was enough. So she said, I told him that we were Jewish. And at that point, he said, well, I'm going to Jarosław as well. I'm going to accompany, but I have to take you to the Gestapo, hand you over to the Gestapo. And she said she knew, she understood, and she told me that. So that's how we started traveling together. And of course, she was thinking, various what
In
could
her mind, what to do. How
what
could
to
she-
do. There was nothing to do. He was very clever in not that I was going to run, but keeping either one or the other girl in his sights. But no, we just traveled together, and to Jarosław as we were completely exhausted. We had in the hair or in the car, we had
Lice.
lice. Yes, sorry, we had lice everywhere. We were exhausted. We had to change trains, and my mother was still thinking and not coming up with nothing because there was nothing. But when we came close to Jarosław, when we started getting off the train, I suddenly woke up, and I swear I wasn't thinking at all through the train because we were so tired. But as I started walking down the steps, was just suddenly, I said, "Oh my God, I don't want to die," and I start pulling at my mother. "Mom, I don't want to die. I don't want to die." So my mother turned to him. And she said, why don't you let her go? She's blonde, maybe she can, survive. And I said, no. I said, I don't want to go without you. No. So we continue walking toward Gestapo. And so she asked him, well, first of all, she asked him to do us one favor, that when we get to the Gestapo, she'll give him our suitcases and the money and even the coats that we had on our backs. If she promises one thing, that he's going to have a shot immediately, quickly, because she didn't want to be separated from the children, and she knew the suffering that it was going to cause, and she knew that the end of it would be that we would be killed anyway. So he promised, and she gave him the tickets for the suitcases and whatever money she had. And as we're walking, she's still thinking. And she asked him if he had any children of his own, and he said yes, he did. So she said sort of to him, look, I gave you everything. Why do you want us on your conscience? Just let us go and try our luck. And something happened to him. He got touched. And so
she mentioned the one thing that was important to him, his children.
Children and his conscience, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and so
she was smart.
He said, you don't have a chance. And in Polish it sounds better. Spodeszczu podrenne means from the rain underneath, but in English I would say you don't have a chance. Anyway, but he turned around and he left. And so there we were, just the three of us, and in the middle of a strange town, and we're walking in the main road, and my mother's carrying my sister. She sees a little cafe, and we walked into the cafe. She asked for a little milk for my sister and started asking people around if they have any places that they would take lodgers, because we needed to be inside. The papers, we knew that we had papers, but we didn't know if they were good. No computer, so they couldn't, do it like that. But still, she didn't want to be examined. And so some young man got up, took us, said he was going to take us to a lady, a washerwoman, who took lodgers, and maybe she could take us. So he walked us over there, and as I said, full of lies, exhausted, just at the end of our tether, so to speak. And this little lady comes, it's a very little lady. She was a washerwoman, and she was standing there looking at us, and she said that she'll take us. And her strapping 4 sons, she had the strapping 4 sons. They said, no, don't take her. I mean, the way we looked, I'm not surprised. So, but she said, oh, no, she said, this is a mother and 2 children. I have to take her. And see, this wonderful Christian lady. And
do you think the 4 sons suspected anything?
Well, we were strangers. We looked strange, we were all dirty and exhausted. And she had people who were working, there.
Right.
But she understood that they were children.
Right.
And, that's why she took us. And she made very sure that I was brought up in the Catholic faith there, as long as I lived there. And whether she suspected or not, I don't know. And
so you sort of learned Catholic ritual from her.
I only knew that I have to cross myself going in and out of church with my right hand. But the lucky thing was there that the Polish children had school 2 hours a day. And one of the hours was Catholic, was religion. I was a very nice priest teaching the religion, and because I knew how to read, then the catechism was what they gave us all. Mm-hmm. And therefore I could read up quickly and catch up a little bit. And I was a kid, I was young. So I guess. And then so I went to school, and my mother said she's going to find, some work, because she had no money, nothing on us. And she went and looked for jobs. The next day she changed a few jobs, like housekeeper jobs. And food was very scarce for the Poles as well. So we kids used to go to orchards and, steal a little bit. And we used to steal from the farmers who used to bring it in. And they had to bring a certain contingent. And once they were weighed in, they didn't care. So we'd jump on the back of the cars and we'd just grab potatoes, carrots, whatever was available. Mostly we had, for some reason, we had this terrible not rice, but barley. Yes, barley, which I couldn't stand. I'm sure I went hungry a few days. I never liked barley even before the war. So that was it, yes.
Is it 1942 that we're talking now? This is about 1942 that you as a family arrive in Yaroslav?
I don't know the dates.
But so approximately how long are you there?
You see, I don't do that because
You were too young to remember, probably.
I wasn't paying attention. I mean, I can go back and check, but
it was for a fairly long, longer than a year, probably 2 years, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, because my mother kept looking for ways to improve our standing. She was very worried about the security,
right.
And somebody might recognize it because my sister had very curly hair, which in Poland is a sign of Jewish.
Right.
Because nowadays it's not like that, but in those days, Polish girls had straight blonde hair. Mine were blonde and wavy, so they could braid it, but in her case it was, an afro. She still has an afro,
So what did your mom found work?
So she found various jobs. And then she decided that, maybe we could go to work in Germany. Maybe that would be safer because the Germans not as good in recognizing Poles, Jewish Poles, that is. But they wouldn't take us because my sister was too young. So then she decided to take a chance and apply to the German military camp, where you had the picture there, for a job, because she felt if she has an Ausweis, which is an ID card,
right.
If they stop you in the street or anything, she could.
She has some proof, right?
Exactly. So, so she applied. We waited for quite a few weeks for them to supposedly check the papers, but we didn't know whether we were going to live or die again. But it came through. So she got this job doing the potatoes, and in the meantime, I was the only one, as I said, being brought up properly in the Catholic religion. Mm-hmm. So I went to communion, classes and communion. My sister was very young, so she was not involved. We had one communication from our friends before they passed away, before they were killed. Through the Red Cross came a letter from my father that he was safe with his sister in Palestine. In those days, it was all under the British mandate. And so my father...
So Palestine is what we know as Israel today.
Today, yes. And we knew that his sister had made Aliyah, meaning that she went to work in Palestine in the 1930s, and so the whole family was there. We never met that part of the family, and we didn't know exactly where they were, but we knew that meant he was out of Russia. But because it didn't do us any good at the time, as long as the Germans were there, we couldn't get into contact with them.
You got stuck.
Of course.
As well.
But we had hope that if it ever ends, we had no idea what was going on in the world. We had no idea what the Germans were doing, where the front was. We had nothing at all.
What was your daily life like during this time period? You said that you were definitely catechism was a part of your life.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Were you going to school?
Pardon?
You were going to school?
Yes. Well, we had the 2 hours a day, and then I worked for a neighbor who had some German blood in him. So my mother felt it was good to work. Not for money, but just
to keep busy.
Yeah, exactly. And my mother was always looking for something better, just in case. In the meantime, the Germans were looking for one of our hostess' son, who was killing pigs for a living, which was a death penalty again. The Poles were not allowed to do that either. And one night, they came storming in the middle of the night with guns drawn, and aroused everybody out, and so we came out, and my mother came up with the ID. Oh no, he said, you stay, and then they took the rest of them to the station. They took them, they all came back the next morning. They were just checking if they were working. That was their thing. For the Poles, they had to be working. So, but it was one of those things that you could, there was always a possibility they might catch you.
Right. So
But,
there really was no chance to ever really relax.
No,
You were always
couldn't.
on guard.
Absolutely, you were. No, I mean you had to be careful
Right.
what you said. My sister was very happy; she didn't know a thing, so.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss, right?
But, yeah,
So-
but listen, yes.
In 1944, July 1944,
Yeah.
Poland is liberated, but what happens?
Well, in the meantime, it's not liberated yet because you see, one morning we wake up and there's complete silence on the roads. We don't know what's happening. Usually the carts go back and forth. We're on the main road. We don't know what's happening. As I said, we didn't know what the situation was at the front. And suddenly there is the black cloud bomb, and the bomb splits over a house.
So they were carpet bombing.
No, it was just the one bomb.
Just one bomb.
The
Oh,
one
God.
bomb, yeah. And that's what hits my hand. My mother grabs me and my sister, and we walk to the hospital. And there she learns that the Russians are coming. They're not there yet. But
So it hit the home that you were living in.
yeah, right in the middle. There was a house with three kind of separated
And
areas.
you were wounded.
And I was wounded, yeah. So I got to the hospital and I spent 2 months there. In the meantime, they say the Russians are coming, so we know that they're going to sort of not kill us this time. And that's where we end. I don't know whether you want me to continue.
I do. We have time, and I really wanted to.
Yeah.
First, I wanted to ask a
Yeah.
question about
Yeah.
your landlady that you were living
Oh
with.
yes, of course. When my mother went back to the place, she found out that the lovely lady was under the roof in the kitchen. They killed her, and we kind of walked over there when the bomb fell.
So she didn't survive either.
So did not survive, unfortunately, no. The neighbor had to take my mother and sister. There was nothing apparently to salvage there at all. It was just, we had nothing really. And, well, my mother started knitting a little bit just to earn a little bit so she could send out questions if we could find my father,
Right.
which she eventually did.
Even though there was no internet, it's amazing how people did find each other through the
Radio
Red Cross
and papers. So she put a note in the radio, and apparently it went in Tel Aviv, and the lady who got that announcement recognized my father. She knew him.
How long did it take before you were reunited after the war?
A year before we managed to get some communication, but then it took a little longer. We found out that he was part of the Polish unit that came from Russia with Stalin's okay, because everybody tells me you don't escape from Russia. Well, the fact is he didn't escape exactly, because he joined this Polish unit because they needed men on the ground. So Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill agreed on letting the guys out.
Was this Anders' army?
Anders' army, and Anders was very kind. He refused to just take the men, he took families. So actually my aunt and uncle came, and my cousin came that way as well. My father stayed in the army as a dentist, and he was stationed in Egypt. But because we didn't know any of that, he did not come himself to get us out. He sent my cousin, who was in the British Army in Palmach. They were always in two places. And
So let me just go back and do a little chronology.
yes,
July of 44, the town that you are in is liberated, but the war doesn't end for another year.
yeah, that's where we were. Well, and the Russians
So
stay
you-
anyway.
And you stay in Poland.
Well, we had no choice.
Right.
My mother said that they're not leaving. So
What was it like for you as a Jew?
I wasn't a Jew yet. I couldn't say I was Jew because there was
Was my
pogrom.
question. So your
There-
mother said to you,
My mother said you can't because there was a pogrom, and the few Jews that came out of hiding were killed by the Poles.
okay,
And the lady who kept us said that Hitler didn't finish his job. So we had to keep this up until we got to Krakow, and then my cousin put us in touch with the Jewish agency, and again we couldn't find lodging, and again we had to continue with the charade. And it was not until we got into the group of people being taken out. This was a semi permission from the Russians.
So even in a bigger town, a bigger city like Krakow, you still couldn't.
Well, it wasn't Krakow, it was the suburbs. That's what it was. Yes.
But your mother still didn't feel
Yes,
comfortable.
no, it's not that.
Right.
She was asked directly.
Ah, okay.
So, you know, it was no.
So you kept up this charade. Then
Yeah,
the war
yeah.
ends in May of 1945. Essentially, the war's over.
But the Russians are there.
Okay.
And the Russians, as I said, allow you, some Jews to come out. They take us in lorries or trucks, as you call them, yes. And then they put us into the German side. We take train to Berlin, so we were in Berlin. Then we ended up in a DP camp in Trani, Berletta Trani near Bari. And we didn't spend much time. My father finally connects with us.
So let me again just clarify.
Yes.
You're in a displaced persons camp
Yeah.
where people who survived the Holocaust
Yes,
ended up congregating in
Yes.
these displaced persons camps
correct.
because they couldn't go home.
Right, right. Well, nobody.
There was nothing there for
My
them.
mother never tried, so. You know,
She was done with Poland.
yeah. Well, we had no family in Zaleszczyki.
You didn't mention grandparents, aunts, uncles.
Okay, both sides of the grandparents were in Krakow. My grandfather, Pani, had a heart attack in 1939 and was buried before the Germans came. My grandmother, we thought she was in Auschwitz, but you know, our librarian found that she was not taken in the first round. He's still looking for her. We didn't really know what
She
happened
didn't
to
survive,
her.
but you don't have information.
No, she didn't. No, but you know, I thought how sad it was. She had 4 children, and there was nobody there for her. Nobody. Yeah. So, yeah.
So extended family didn't survive.
No, my one aunt survived in Russia.
And so you are reunited with your father eventually.
Eventually, my sister thinks she's Catholic.
What did you do? How did that work?
Well,
And what did she find out when what did she do when she found out she was Jewish?
She looked at my cousin and she said, "You know, Ari, you're a nice man, but you're Jewish." So it took a little time, but
I would say.
well, she said that she told me much later on that people were asking her there, you know, you can tell us now, right? And she said, "Look at me. Do I have horns? Do I have a tail?"
Well, you know, I think she must have been. She was exposed to it.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I mean, as a 6-year-old child, you don't pick that up on your own, or a 5-year-old child.
Yeah, right. Of course not.
Right. So you're reunited,
So,
and
because my father was part of the Polish unit, part of the British Army, we had the right to go to England. And that's why very quickly, 2 months at the DP camp, and we were rushed off to England. And that's where I grew up. Left of my time.
you have a quirky story about your Olympic. You became a table tennis person.
Well, because I was so frustrated not knowing the language, not knowing the people, and I wanted to play tennis. I wasn't a swimmer. I liked playing tennis. No facilities, but table tennis was everywhere. So I picked up table tennis. And I'm a pretty good hitter at that. And I hit and I hit. And it really took out a lot of, you know, aggravation. And also it was good for socializing. You know, we didn't have help from the, you know, the people like they have here, the social workers, social workers and all that. So this was my actually cure. So I played a lot. I found out that where we got the house in London, there was a Jewish youth club called Maccabi Club, and the Maccabi clubs are all over the world. It's for Jewish youth. And once Israel was established, they started having what we call the Jewish Olympics, the Maccabi Games, every 4 years. It's the same thing, but just for the Jewish youth. And so, because I played so much, I got good at it, and they sent me to Israel to represent England. And I was very happy for the first time, to see Israel. Meet my family, my new family. It was just a wonderful thing. Well, I think that did more for my spirit than anything else in the world.
So you stayed in England. You married a Holocaust survivor, yes?
That was already in Israel.
In Israel.
Yeah, no, I stayed in England. I went in 1953. I went to Israel to play the Maccabiah Games, met everybody, and would have liked to stay longer, but my mother wasn't well, so I knew I had to go back. And my mother, unfortunately, passed away in 1956. In 1956, there was another Maccabiah Games, so I went again. And this time I said I'd stay a year, but it ended up 11. And I ended up working for the American Embassy in Tel Aviv. And that's why I'm here, because, everybody, when we write in the class here about our memories, everybody had a dream to come to the United States. I never thought about coming to the United States, but it just so happened that I met my husband, who was a Holocaust survivor as well. We came here for a year in 1968, and that's 1968. I'm still here. And I just, when I retired, I looked very much for some place where I could volunteer, and I found a wonderful place here at the museum, and that's where I'll stay. I'm not leaving.
Well, that's good, because the museum needs you. So, when did your father pass away?
He passed away, oh boy, you're asking. The dates are very hard for me, but he was 83. That's
so
all I
much
can
later than your mother.
Oh yes, no, he
Your mother
visited.
was, how old
My
was she?
mother was only 47.
She was 47.
Yeah.
Okay, so she
Yeah.
was really young.
Yeah,
That's must have been devastating to lose her at such a young age.
she's my hero.
She is your hero.
Yes.
But I always think what's so interesting to me is that women are so strong, have such a strong, they play such a strong, important role during this time period. And she,
Yes.
I mean, when I read her story and I read through your notes, the notes that you've written about her, I always think she really must have been tough, a tough person.
She said that sports develops courage. And she was, she jumped from the highest place to, when she was swimming, she jumped on skis, she danced on skates, she was absolutely fearless. She rode horses. I mean, any kind of sport that you mentioned, she would do. But her main thing was the children always, and I just feel always very sad when I think that she didn't see any grandchildren and didn't live long enough.
Right.
And, but I feel that she would be pleased with her two daughters, who did nice.
Where does Eva live?
Eva lives in London with her 4 kids and 3 grandkids, and of course I visit every year.
So at this point, I think we have time for questions. So let me open it up for questions. Yes?
How did your mother die?
Let me repeat the question until the mic goes around. How did your mother die?
My mother had the recurrence of cancer. She had the first cancer operation in Poland. I think from the awful thing that she felt about my hand being wounded, that was when she had the first operation. They weren't even sure it was cancer, but they said to me, "We don't want you to be orphans, so let her have the operation." So she had breast cancer, and somehow she managed to survive 10 years. In England, they didn't have the right machinery to check, and unfortunately, she passed away. Yeah.
Yes, right here.
Yeah, my son wants to know if you met any German Nazis that questioned your religion.
No, there was no question for children about the religion, as far as I know. I mean, I tried not to ever give them any reason to suspect anything. No, I've never done that, but I would have answered just like a Catholic person. I went to all the rituals and everything, so I was pretty well organized there.
Yes, right here.
Does your sister practice Judaism or Christianity?
She is Jewish. She's been to Israel. We did the Shnat Sharut, which is a year of service in Israel. Once she learned she was Jewish, she understood and more or less became quite comfortable with that. It was not, we lived in England where, you know, the Jews were not that treated badly like they were in Poland. So yeah, she's been back to Israel. She's very much so, but we were never very religious, so it wasn't a difficult thing. And when my mother worried about me maybe looking forward to being Catholic, she explained to me that we all prayed to the same God but through different religions. But she said, and you're Jewish, that was it. So it was very simple for me. I never had any conflicts.
Did you have a hard time giving up Catholicism after the war?
No, I wasn't. No, I mean, I liked the religion very much, but I understood that this was one of the religions that people believe in, and that mine was Jewish. I didn't have any knowledge about the Jewish religion, but it didn't matter. My mother's explanation was enough, because she also told me that Jews, we get persecuted much more than the Catholics, but that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Questions? More questions?
There's a question over there.
There's a question all the way in back. I'll get to you.
There's a young man there that wants to talk.
First of all, thank you for being here. How concerned are you that we may be a generation or two away from people either not believing the Holocaust occurred or downplaying it in some way?
So how concerned are you that we're a generation or two away from people not believing the Holocaust?
Well, I am very concerned about that. That's why I'm here. And that's why, you know, this museum is so very, very important to us Jews, the survivors, because we want to make sure that people know this is not the only thing you have to remember about the Jews. I mean, we have a very rich history. This is what happened to us in this time, but we have been persecuted before, and we have other also attributes that we need to be remembered for, and this museum is what we are giving up everything to hold for us. You know, we're not interested in making people suffer or make them sad, but we want to warn them for the future that, you know, try to prevent this happening. That's why we're here, and that's why Holocaust remembrance is so important.
Yes, right here.
If I kind of had two questions, but what do you think you would have done if your mom or your sister had been found, and what do you think they would have done if you were found?
You mean if they were discovered by the Nazis? So
well, if we had been discovered by the Nazis, we would have all been taken away. The children usually would get killed immediately because they had no use for children. My mother might have survived as a slave labor, but she did not want to survive. So that's why when she decided that if we were caught, we should all be shot together, because she did not want to live without the children. That's what moms are like, you know. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, I think what I'm going to ask is that, you know, we always give you the last word, Helena, so.
Well, I more or less said a few last words. I'm really doing this eyewitness account because, first of all, I want to honor my mother, the 6 million who perished, and also because I feel that you need to know what happened, because as you mentioned there, that sometimes people say that it didn't happen. I wish it hadn't, but you know it did. And this museum is full of things to prove to you that it has happened. And I just want so much for my children and grandchildren to be safer. And I just pray for that. So that's my reason for being here. And I thank you very much for coming and listening to us. And I hope that this will remain with you also.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.